Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session, The Beating Heart of Buildings, the People. I am Eva Bardinelli, and I'll be the facilitator for the sessions today. I'm a Buildings Policy Coordinator at Climate Action Network Europe, who is the leading coalition of NGOs fighting for climate change in Europe. And then I'm also here on behalf of our co-organizers, Solar Heat Europe, and the European Federation of Buildings and Woodworkers. So just a little bit of, let's say, background for this important session this morning with our speakers and our experts and audience. We'll be exploring the opportunities and challenges that are stemming from the revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, because we all know that there are a lot of opportunities within the building sector, especially in view of the transition towards decarbonized and highly energy efficiency buildings. In this session today, we'll be making sure that indeed we talk about the need for more workforce, but of course, like to ensure that the workforce that will have to be created, it's actually of high quality, it's inclusive, so to ensure that the transition in the building sector, it's ambitious, and of course, socially just and inclusive. So just a little bit of few words of introduction also for the fantastic panel that we have today. We have a first panel with EU-level speakers who are Eike Leberle from the European Parliament, representing also Kieran Cuff today, the lead rapporteur from the European Parliament for the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And we also have Roman Orvas, Policy Officer at DG GROW at the European Commission. And then we pass on to the second panel, for the stakeholder panel. We'll be hearing from Mariangela Fabbri, Head of Research at Building Performance Institute Europe, from Céline Carré, Head of Public Affairs at Saint-Gobain and representing the Renovate Europe campaign. We'll hear from Pedro Diaz from Solar Heat Europe, Policy Director, and last but definitely not least from Slavica Uzelak, Policy Officer at EFDBWW. So before getting into the discussions, I would like to remind you just one only actually housekeeping rule. For any questions and for engaging, please use the QR code for the Slido that you'll see in the screen. And then just before starting our very interesting discussion, I would like to air a very important video recording that was recorded by MEP Kieran Cuff to start the discussion. For any questions and for engaging, please use the QR code for the Slido that you'll see in the screen. And then just before starting our very interesting discussion, I would like to air a very to start the discussion.
Firstly, let me thank you for the invitation
for any
to
questions
speak
and
at
for
the
engaging,
EU
please
Sustainable
use
Energy
the
Week.
QR code
And
for
let
the
me
Slido
apologise for my
that you'll
absence.
see in the
I'm
screen.
currently occupied
And then
with
just before
constituency
starting
work
our
back in Ireland
very
for
interesting
the Green
discussion,
Week, which is why I'm not able to be with you in Strasbourg. Hello, I'm Kieran Cuff. Firstly, let me thank you for the invitation to speak at the EU Sustainable Energy Week. And let me apologise for my absence. I'm currently occupied with constituency work back in Ireland for the Green Week, which is why I'm not able to be with you today. And I recorded this video last week when I was down in Strasbourg at the plenary session of the European Parliament there. Since I began my work as an MEP in 2019, there's been a seismic shift towards more ambition in climate policy. Over the last year, I've worked as the lead negotiator on the revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the EPBD, which was passed in the European Parliament back in March of this year. My core aim with this legislation is to ensure that we tackle Europe's worst performing buildings and energy poverty. And with the Fit for 55 package and the European Green Deal, we have an opportunity to put citizens first in the energy transition. Yet the reality of policy making may not be as optimistic as the rhetoric. Over the last year, we've seen serious attempts to maintain the status quo and weaken climate legislation from its full potential. And at the same time, we must provide workable solutions for our citizens. We cannot allow high energy bills to continue. Millions of euro are wasted every year in subsidies for inefficient gas boilers. In 2019, we know that 19 million Europeans, 19% of the population, couldn't adequately heat their homes, and that figure is rising. So that's why we want to prioritise vulnerable groups, by providing social protection and by targeting the worst performing buildings. This will ensure that vulnerable people are brought out of energy poverty and that we're on track towards a climate neutral building stock by 2050. A strong EPBD framework will also lead to lots of gas savings, and we know that 47 million cubic metres of gas every year could be saved under the EPBD, and that's the equivalent of the annual gas consumption of 35 million consumers. So moving forward, we've begun negotiations under the Swedish presidency. We'll continue under the upcoming Spanish presidency on the 31st of August. But I'm confident that we can find agreement with the Council under the Spanish presidency. Even on the highly political points, the worries we hear from our citizens are the same. The costs of renovations, the weight of high energy bills, the need to find a right balance in line with available workers and materials. Within the Shadows team, we think that we can build bridges between the Council and the Parliament texts. I hope to finish the file soon so that we finish the negotiations on all of the Fit for 55 files and begin our path to climate neutrality as soon as possible. With your help, we will. Thank you.
Very clear message from Mr. Kirankov. Indeed, I hear a lot about prioritization of the most vulnerable, but also like keeping the ambition high to ensure that we indeed deliver like the highly energy efficient buildings and decarbonized buildings that we really need to achieve our climate goals. So this is a very nice segue for actually our first ever speaker for the panel. So Eike, would you like to elaborate a little bit more about the European Parliament's position on the PBD, especially highlighting the social dimension to it and the provisions that you worked on? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for having me here. My name is Heike Leberle. I'm Energy Policy Advisor for the Greens in the European Parliament and currently working with Mr. Cuff on the revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. Some of the things have already been said by Mr. Koff, of course, so I'll probably try to go a little bit deeper into who are these people, who are the ones that are the beating heart, who is concerned as well. So, of course, we have as a first group the building professionals, the advisors and policymakers. And if we look a little bit on what are the jobs that would come from an ambitiously revised EPBD, we see in the Commission Impact Assessment that between 2020 and 2030, we would be able to create 1.2 million new jobs in the low-skilled level and 450,000 jobs in highly skilled jobs. And this is also accompanied, of course, by other initiatives like renewables deployment, other efficiency gains in other sectors. So there is the possibility to have new jobs, local jobs. Why are the jobs green? Not only because they're in the green sector, but they should also aim to be sustainable in the sense of continuing to be inclusive, as Eva has said in the introduction. And this is something that I'll come in the second slide, where we try to also anchor these principles in the EPBD. Then the others concerned are, of course, the renters, the owners, the social housing occupants, but also vulnerable households and households in energy poverty. Mr. Koff has said it in his video message. This is something that we are very concerned of. 75 buildings are considered inefficient in Europe. This means most of people currently live in inefficient buildings. They pay high bills, as was also illustrated by the example on gas bills, and especially during the crisis here last year. And the worst thing is that the poorest people usually inhabit the worst performing buildings, and this is something that we think must be tackled in priority. I spoke about the residential buildings, but of course we also work, learn, receive care in buildings. So that's why I also put here the uses of public and non-residential buildings. And then we have also, of course, the dimension of e-mobility users, or those that require accessibility to buildings. So we want to empower these, but there's also a lot of jobs actually related to these. So if we look into e-mobility, if we want to charge e-cars or bikes at home, There's, of course, a dimension in the automotive sector, in the battery recycling sector, where we really hope to transform buildings, but also the larger society here. I've made also a special point on women because they're usually underrepresented in the workforce in the construction sector, and they are also overly impacted by energy poverty, especially when heading single-family households. So what are the tools that we need to create those jobs to tackle those issues? I have here the tools to empower, let's say. So I would see these are different. We have the policy and regulatory measures, clear policies, regulatory measures such as minimum energy performance standards, policy tools such as energy performance certificates or building renovation passports are, of course, the policy tools that help to guide the way, that also set the timelines and the objectives to make sure that there is a clear investment framework. SMEs that represent usually 99% of the companies active in the building sector, these are the ones that would need to make the necessary investments, skilling, reskilling, upskilling their workforce, hiring new people, and with the clear policy framework as hopefully deployed through the EPBD and national policies, they can make these necessary investments. That's why also in the Parliament position on the EPBD, we have a lot of additions in the national building renovation plans that are required to be put in place by the member states, where we really want that member states detail all the timelines and measures, the budget applied, the trainings deployed, so that the necessary workforce can be built up to implement the policies and to reach the objectives. So this is something where we think that there needs to be reporting on the number of vocational, educational training, and also with a gender dimension, so that there can be really things developed that are very concrete and they match the ambition. I've also put here inclusion and participation and give an example on the next slide, as well as financial support and social safeguards. So this comes back to the question of who's concerned, who is the beating heart. It's not only those that work in the sectors, but also that live in the houses. So it really concerns us all. And as Mr. Kav has already said, these are the ones that we should target first. We need social safeguards such as rental price breaks, bans of evictions. We can't afford that renovations lead to people losing their home or overpaying. So there needs to be new ideas on how to tackle this, and we have developed some of them. So what's really in the EPBD? We have suggested to enlarge the provisions on information so that there's really one-stop shops in the whole EU, accessible for free, where people can get all the information on financial support, on renovation techniques, on all kinds of procedures they will have to undergo. We want also that in the access to finance, we have a strong focus on cost-neutral renovations. So these are these on-bill schemes or energy service company renovations where there's no upfront investment costs and people just by paying their energy bill costs to a renovation company can refinance the renovation of their home. Then, of course, we also, in this financing, we need to speak about grants. There are people who will not get a credit. They will also not be able to engage in renovations by themselves. They would just need support. And that's why the report calls for a dedicated fund from European level to finance renovations, and also calls for an EU renovation loan. Then, as the next point here, I have put citizens-led renovations, community energy. We really think that the EPBD should also be the moment where we can boost local projects, community-driven projects to valorize local know-how, local expertise, but also make it more inclusive. So this neighborhood approach and integrated renovations, they are supposed to keep local social patterns, work against gentrification, and also look further than just energy aspects. So really, how can we organize sustainable mobility, the energy provision, water management, waste removal, and so on. So really have something more integrated. Then I also put here the New European Bauhaus. which is of course a lighthouse from the European Commission, lighthouse project that tries to bring all this together for new buildings, where all the elements that I mentioned can come together. And this is something we would also like to mirror in the EPBD, so that that it gives an orientation, what can be achieved, what should be achieved in terms of integration, inclusion, and all the elements we have mentioned here. In addition to our negotiations, of course, I'd hope to learn more from you today. I see there's way more expert people here already in the room than I am. So let's look forward also to hear from the discussions and the contributions. And if you would like to find out more about our own policies, I've put 2 links here: an energy poverty handbook we published together with several actors, with the Coalition for Energy Savings, and then also a publication on a home for everyone, so to have decent access to home. So thank you very much for having me.
Thanks to you, Heike. If I can really summarize from your intervention, I would say that long-term perspective, planning, also a systemic view, and leaving no one behind, actually taking into account the different facets within the building sector and workforce and occupants trend and so on and so forth. It's very important at the heart of the European Parliament's position. Thanks a lot. So now we move on to Roman, our representative from the European Commission. And with you, Roman, we would like to zoom out a little bit from the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive and actually learning about what are the initiatives and programs that the European Commission has or is planning to launch in order to, let's say, create more workforce in the construction sector. And I would also like to ask you about how REPowerEU and REPowerEU plan with its new objectives for the building sector has changed such activities.
Thank you very much for inviting me today, let's say, to this very interesting meeting, discussing the renovation skills and, let's say, greening of our building stock. My name is Roman Horváth. I'm from DG GROW, European Commission, and I'm from the construction unit dealing with skills there and investing. I would like to start that when we are speaking about some heartbeat of buildings and people, usually we can have like 2 views who are those people. One is that those people are us, who are actually exploring using the buildings. So let's say we expect that buildings are of highest quality, fulfilling our needs. And other part are those people who are building or renovating or running buildings. So it's let's say construction sector people. So I would like to speak more about those construction sector people in this regard, because my predecessors spoke more about those people who are using the buildings. For the construction sector, the whole Green Deal and, let's say, greening of EU economy and renovations as such is a big opportunity, because it means work contracts for them, so means activities which can generate profit for them, and this profit, of course, can be shared with their workforce, so the employees to be let's say, have some social fair sharing of such activities. Of course, there is a challenge, because such companies need to be prepared for this renovation. So they need to invest into technologies, into skills, to be really able to cope with such a task, to bring buildings, let's say, to passive standards or something between the existing state and new state. And in this regard, I would like to discuss, let's say, or speak about those 3 issues, which is some kind of legislation frameworks or regulatory framework, some funding provided by the Commission, and, let's say, also some Commission initiatives focusing on skills. Regarding legislative framework, regulatory framework, our latest proposals are at hands of our 2 co-legislators. So let's say they are discussing their final shape, and we are looking with great expectations on the final results. But I would like to draw one attention that usually we are speaking a lot about renovations. And Mr. Kaff also said that it is always necessary to find some balance in renovation, so because it needs some money, so what we will renovate, how deeply, whether just minor or more, and whether we will just change thermal insulation of the wall or roof, or whether we will use some solar panels or heat pumps. So there is a lot of options. But in the legislation also new buildings are being tackled. And it's somehow a bit overseen from time to time that all new buildings, they have to be already almost near zero buildings. And there is an ambition of the Commission in the proposal of EPBD that new buildings by end of decade should be passive buildings. So already we are building buildings now which are heavily contributing to, let's say, our green transition. So to our climate neutrality target by 2050. And in this regard, we are already having some skilled labor force which is building these buildings. So this is some kind of our asset that in construction sector, usually we don't have a really strong division between workers, that some workers are building just new buildings, some are doing just renovation. Usually some kind of mixture, and those skills are very similar. So we can say that because for new buildings, we are already needing green skills now, and for renovations, we will need them more and more, that green skills of construction workforce will be a new normal soon. So let's say we should remember this thing. And in this regard, the Commission is supporting skills development either at the European level via various funds like Erasmus Plus or LIFE, and at national level, providing member states means via cohesion policy and recovery and resilience facility, so those national recovery and resilience plans. I would like to return to those two funding instruments, because usually when Commission is proposing some kind of initiatives, various of our stakeholders are really analyzing them into detail and providing those analyses to wide public. In both cohesion policy and recovery and resilience facility, there are areas which are clearly focusing on renovations, so providing some means for renovations, so some support. It's often overseen there are various other areas in which those financial instruments focusing on building of some physical assets, so either new buildings for something else or infrastructure or whatever, and those everything needs, let's say, construction sector as an enabler, as a solution provider, because any new building wouldn't be being built without construction workers. And frequently, like I might give an example from this recovery and resilience facility, those national plans, that there are some, let's say, priorities which might sound strange to us, like judicial system reform. But when you would look at it, it's about changing of some law, but also about building like new buildings for courts or renovation of existing buildings. So usually Union and the Commission doesn't provide financial means directly just for renovation, but also frequently indirectly with some other policy areas for which construction ecosystem or sector acts as some kind of enabler or solution provider, because let's say physical assets is rather difficult to build without construction. So this is still the opportunity. And also in this regard, I must say that in some way we are rather lucky, because we are having this very specific instrument, which is resilience and recovery facility, which is being used for the first time. We never had it in the past, and now we are facing the energy crisis and various, let's say, collected events, and we can use these instruments also to address such events like this energy crisis. And some parts of this recovery and resilience facility was really redirected to Repower EU activities for member states. So in some possibilities, it's possible to say that we really are having good timing with these very specific instruments, which is, let's say, having there a lot of money, much more than cohesion policy itself. Cohesion policy for years was a flagship of European funding, and now we have instruments which is even bigger, and well, let's say for shorter time period, for just 5 years. And also those two instruments are very much focusing on skills development. Regarding skills, it's clear that when we would like to move forward with the greening of our economy and greening of our building stock, we need workforce with appropriate skills. So Commission is paying a really big attention and providing means regarding, let's say, upskilling and reskilling to member states, and also various supporting actions. Regarding means, those means are usually not earmarked that are for construction or for automotive. Usually there is a package for member state, because every member state has a different situation and this might evolve during years. So there is some leeway for member state to decide what kind of sector or what kind of skills it would like to support. And this is perhaps the role of various national stakeholders to really make some lobbying and press on member states to invest such money into skills development in construction sector, because as I said, for implementation of various let's say, of building of physical assets, we need a really very well skilled construction labor force, and those activities frequently mentioned in cohesion policy or recovery and resilience national plans are very much focusing on physical assets. So when member states would spend money on upskilling and reskilling workforce, this workforce, well prepared, would help them to implement and spend those money provided to them via those financial tools. So it's some kind of win-win situation. And as I said, let's say those activities would bring construction companies some work, contracts, profit, which they can use, let's say, to further improve their technical capabilities and skill. So it's not really a circle, but some kind of spiral, so they can get on higher and higher and higher level. And this is what we want. We would like to have buildings or physical assets which would really satisfy our needs. And skills are very important because it's not just construction ecosystem, but in general, a lot of sectors are suffering specifically with technical skills. So therefore, this year we have a year of skills, European Year of Skills, which was launched of 9th of May and will run for the whole year till next year. And this is the aim of it this year is to draw some attention of this challenge, to steer some kind of discussion, and let's say to make some awareness that this is the challenge that should be somehow addressed. And the best to address it is to address it together somehow with common approach. This is the same, let's say, the issue of European Pact for skills in construction sector. So it's gathering of construction stakeholders in which everyone can contribute by its possibilities, capabilities. So let's say it's not necessary to develop something very specific, but everyone has some specific knowledge asset and can share it with others, and together, let's say, the whole construction sector can grow. In March this year, the Commission presented a document which is called Transition Pathway for Construction, how to make the whole ecosystem more green, digital, and resilient. And in this document, all activities of the Commission, member states, and also of stakeholders are being summarized. And also there are some specific examples of various activities which are contributing to this greening, digitalization, and resilience of the construction ecosystem. And of course, we would like to invite our stakeholders, but also member states, to present more such activities and in common, let's say, manner to improve our, let's say, whole ecosystem to be able to cope with challenges, and in, let's say, reward to provide us with really perfect built environment, what we are expecting, and let's say bringing us to this Green Deal target to be climate neutral by 2050. So partnership is very much important, and together we are much stronger than alone. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Roman. Indeed, very, very important words. I mean, I take from your intervention that indeed, like, we need legislative, like a strong legislative framework, funding, of course, like to accompany the efforts in the future, but especially capacity building, absorption of funding at national level, exchange of best practices, and partnership, which is the best, the most important point. So without any further ado, thanks a lot to both our fantastic EU-level speakers. We move on to the first Q&A, like a shorter Q&A directed to our speakers from the EU-level. You are kindly invited to send your questions throughout the Slido, and I will be reading them in the screen. So don't be shy. This is the time to engage. In the meantime, maybe to just like do a little bit of an icebreaker. I have, of course, I've always have questions, so I take the privilege of the moderator today. I would like to ask Eike, in relation to the ongoing discussions on the PBD. I would like to ask, especially because I also follow as part of my work the revision process. It would be very useful to understand, like, what are the elements that we need to remind co-legislators to ensure that all the good elements that are part of the European Parliament position are indeed part of the text and the final stages of the revision. That would be very great.
Yes, I think we can't get tired to be reminded about the usefulness to really set the right targets. I hear that from stakeholders, from you, that once there is a clear vision of where we want to be, once there are the objectives in place and the timelines in place, then people will make investments, they will engage, they know how to deploy the necessary materials, the skills, and so on. And of course, it's a tough choice sometimes. We have the policy tool of minimum energy performance standards in the text, and we need to find good ways to maybe find some discretion of how to apply it in the residential sector. If we have people owning their home and it's their only property and they just don't have the capacity to invest, we need to find the right ways. But we think the right way is not to delete minimum and performance standards for this sector, but to find then ways such as cost-neutral renovations, support schemes, targeted ways to help those, and not, let's say, removing this investment certainty, these timelines, these objectives that we need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eike. I look at the screen if there is any questions popping up. No problem, because I also have another one for Roman. So we move on. So Roman, you talked a little bit about the Recovery and Resilience Fund and the facility in general, and how certain, let's say, funding have been redirected to repower EU objective and so on and so forth. Since we take a lot of interest as a climate action network here, but in general, like a very important interest into like implementation level at national level, I would like to ask you if you have any best practices in mind that you have witnessed in member states around the creation of more workforce in the construction sector.
I must say that by so quickly, I don't have really some very specific example in mind. I would like to say that, yeah, let's say the Recovery and Resilience Facility is just, let's say, first milestone where ready by end of the last year. So let's say we started to getting reports of the member states, and usually they focus on some kind of reforms, not really implementation of budget, which is implementation of budget is usually connected with direct, let's say, direct the renovations of buildings, like usually focusing either on private buildings, usually family houses, on public administrative buildings. So we are, and because it takes time, usually construction works, planning, and let's say implementation takes time. So such a good examples we are expecting just probably by end of this year or next year. But yeah, perhaps I would like to draw your attention to this document which I mentioned, Transition Pathway for Construction. We try to collect there some examples of activities, either member states or our stakeholders, which could be of your interest, which could be perhaps replicable in other member states or by other stakeholders. And of course, we are very much open to our stakeholders or member states that they would we are expecting they would present some kind of their best practices, and we will publish it in 1 year time. We will make a website and we will publish such a good practices. Let's say that can also inform others and can serve as a good practice for others that can be replicated, because frequently it's not necessary to discover a wheel because it was already discovered somewhere, just to replicate it. And perhaps I would like to mention some other document when we are speaking of skills. Early this year in February, the Commission adopted communication on a Green Deal industrial plan. It's more about production, of course, in our case, various appliances like boilers, heat pumps, and stuff like that. Not really construction sectors of building as such, but there is one of 4 pillars of this communication is about skills. And there is a very much, let's say, construction sector mentioned in skills development. And of course, the latest initiative of the Commission is focusing on heat pumps, so trying to accelerate heat pump deployment to have 10 million by next 4 years.
Okay, thanks a lot, Roman. So I see we have 2 questions, but we also are very mindful of time because we have a very rich second panel. So I will just redirect these 2 questions to you both, if you can react very, very quickly, if it's possible. So the first one, it seems so much has been done to have tackled misinformation about the PBD. And there are plenty of useful documents circulated. So how can NGOs help disseminate to counteract negative voices, also misinformation on the directive? That I will redirect it to you, Eike. And then just to finish up, working in the sector is unfortunately not attractive enough. Is there any policies at your level to make it more attractive for workers? And I'll be redirecting to you, Roman. So. Back to you.
Okay, yeah, thank you very briefly for that question. I think it's a common task in a way. So NGOs, but also policymakers have to come together. And what we did in the first trilogue was to share everyone's analysis, what are the common worries, the common considerations that have led to the adoption of the different approaches. And we actually realized that the worries are very common, the considerations are very common. I think everyone is worried how to attack this challenge, how to find social safeguards, avoid social hardship, to probably take a differentiated approach according to the building segment, to make sure there's an enabling framework with financial support, but also information with social safeguards and so on. And I think if we all start from the common aims and the common considerations and worries we have, we should all come with the same information in a way at the end and the same conclusion, and then we can share and talk to each other rather than fighting against each other, because I think we all want the same. We want healthy buildings for everyone. We want to achieve our climate targets, and we want to take everyone with us in this journey.
Thanks a lot, Eike. Back to you, Roman.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is a very big challenge, because let's say sometimes it's also some kind of urban legend, because also construction sector is evolving. A few weeks ago, I was at some construction fair presenting construction machinery. And those, let's say, tools being presented, and let's say various heavy machinery presenting there is like science fiction. It was something, like toys for people, so you can play with it. You don't need PlayStation. You will have just a really big tool, and you can influence a lot of stuff. So it's very interesting, and we need to show people that there are also very technologically demanding job, not just there are, let's say, some prejudices existing. But this is not really the Commission role, because we are not so close to our citizens. Usually in this regard, we are cooperating with our stakeholders, let's say, trying to support them, and also with member states, because usually training activities and education is in hands of member states, so we don't have real competencies in this area. So we are providing some supportive role in this regard. And it is very much necessary to show some, let's say, role model examples. If I may say, just some days ago, I looked at various activities in various member states about women, how construction was trying to attract women. Like 2 months ago, we have construction days in Belgium of construction companies, so there was a lot of activities for women. I remember a portal, because we had an MEP from Ireland. I remember Irish portal about the women role models, let's say, presenting what they are doing in construction. So this is because in construction there's like 10% of women only, so it's a big opportunity to attract more women to construction. And those of you who will stay tonight in Belgium or in Netherlands, every Wednesday now is running Dutch series, which is called Vrouwen die bouwen, so women can build. And I think it has 6 pieces, and I think now it's running number 4 or 5 tonight. Usually it's around 9 or something, but it's also available on internet. It was being prepared last year. I watched it all, and it's very interesting. So there is, I think, 16 ladies who are active, either operating heavy machinery or doing just plasters or putting together steel for reinforced concrete. So very interesting jobs, and they are speaking about jobs, and let's say it's possible to see that they like their job very much.
Power to representation. That's very important indeed. So in the interest of time, I'm afraid for the questions that came in, we need to move on. But worry not, because we have a fantastic Slido poll, the first one ever of the session, and you are asked to decide from the 4 options that you see on the screen. And the question is, what are the learnings from last winter in view of the urgent need to transform our buildings to become highly energy efficient and renewable based? I'll give you 1 minute, 1-2 minutes to respond. I see the first one being very popular. Okay, no, the votes are coming in. Great. Okay, I still see the first one is very indeed very popular. So energy transition is not a one winter issue. We need a more long-term structural response to the ongoing fossil fuel crisis. Second, unlocking more financial support and delivering an ambitious EU regulatory framework. Better embedding the social dimension in buildings energy policies. And then relief short-term measures are still very much needed and should better prioritize the most vulnerable segment of the society. So I still see people are voting, but the first one is the preferred so far. I just want to ask our EU level speakers if they have any quick reactions to the results of the poll. Very quick, just to comment.
Yes, let's say, if I may, sorry, I jumped so quickly. The Commission is focusing on energy efficiency really for decades, and we see that it is also point, well, let's say, to make some progress also for decades. Of course, there are some black swans from time to time, like war in Ukraine and a related energy crisis. So definitely it is a long run. So we need to have clear strategy to be adjusted as needed. As I mentioned, that we are having this recovery and resilience facility right now, and we use part of the funding for really Repower EU, let's say, measures funding. So to be always ready and to adjust our orientation as needed to achieve best possible results.
Thank you, Roman. Okay, back to you.
I would have said that probably everyone is right. I think all answers are needed, all measures are needed. The question is indeed with which priority, with budget or effort, and at what level, at European level, at national level. But I think indeed the learning from the winter can only be that we need to increase our resilience by reducing energy efficiency, increasing energy efficiency, reducing our fossil fuel dependence, and yeah, really increasing the social dimension as well. I would say everything is right.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Eike. And thank you both for this very interesting first panel. Now we move on to the second panel, so our stakeholder panel, where we'll be hearing more from experts coming from the academia, private sector, trade unions. So I look at you. So I think we will start with Mariangela. So Mariangela, for you, I think it would be very interesting to hear what could be the elements that we need to embed in the energy performance of buildings directive to ensure that we have more but deeper holistic renovations, and then how do we match the needed future workforce to do the job. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation as well. I think just to quickly answer your first part of the question, what we need to embed in the EPBD, it's a clear message that we cannot get away from renovation and construction, and that is a sector that needs to adjust and adapt. So every element that exists now that really takes towards that direction, I can mention the introduction of minimum energy performance standards for renovation. That is a clear message that we need to renovate the building stock up to a certain level, and that the workforce and the entire supply chain, it's not only those who physically make the changes in the building, the entire supply chain needs to adjust. That takes me to the second part, I think, of your question. We've heard just now how there are so many different policy elements and strategies and initiatives that reinforce and clearly this message that buildings are part of the solution, but it is not an easy solution. We need to figure out how to do it. We know, and it's already been mentioned, that most workers in the construction sector works in small and medium enterprises. So the question is how to make sure that that part can follow. But as I said, it's important to really understand the complexity of the value chain and breaking it down and understanding how each part of the value chain needs to adjust, which means how much material and what type of material we're going to need, how many workers, and what are the skills that they will need to learn to deal with certain materials, install new equipment, and what also, going backwards, how do we plan and conceive and design both the renovation and the new constructions? What are the skills that are needed there? Because we are dealing with two different, I would say, two different aspects. One is what is called the low skill jobs, and there certainly, these are also hard jobs. The people who perform these jobs are also very often part of the low-income, vulnerable part of the population. So we need to provide really the support and the opportunity to be reskilled, and to make those jobs physically also less difficult to bear. There will always be the need for this job. I think the question is, how much do we need, and what is the support that small and micro enterprises need to make sure that they can meet the demand. And then there's the other part, the higher skilled job, the new and innovative jobs that would also make the construction and renovation sector more attractive. And there we need to act before this workforce comes to the work environment. How can we align programs, trainings for all sorts of these skilled jobs? And we need to understand what these jobs are. Digitalization, data mining, planning, how that can be done. Other elements that it's important here is to understand that we need to know how our buildings are built and were built much better than we do today to be able to go into renovation and shorten that time. I could give thousands of anecdotal examples of people going into renovation project and being completely surprised, but how different it turned out from what they had been told at the beginning. And that puts the building owners in a very difficult position, the tenants in a very difficult position, but also those who are performing these jobs. There is one aspect that I would want, just as my last point, to give an example, and it is how we can, where do we start? And we have looked and studied serial renovation as a potential area where we can make the construction and renovation sector more appealing. Of course, it cannot be applied to every type of building, but that's a perfect example of how we can shorten the renovation time, and we can identify better the different contributions of different types of workers and actors in the supply chain into that. And we've made a few studies, and we've found out that the renovation time can be shortened between 20 and 50%. That would also allow doing more renovation at the same time. But we need to really understand what is necessary and where the type of renovation should be rolled out. And member states, public institutions have a big role, because in many cases they can apply that to some of the building that they manage, and they can apply them to the social housing that they manage. There are some member states where the building stock is better suited for this. And the role of the European Commission, and I'm going to close, linking with the EU years of skill, the way we see that, clearly identifying renovation and construction as a priority, and facilitating that conversation and facilitating the dialogue between and among the construction sector, the developers of new materials and technologies, to really understand how that can be brought all together. And communication. We need to change the perception that if you go into construction, you go to a job that is considered not highly from a social perspective, and in terms of quality, it's not appealing. It's only by adjusting and making sure that the supply chain is following the legislation, which is absolutely necessary. Do not take me wrong. I'm not saying that we need to put the changes in legislation at the second step. The two aspects are equally important, and they go hand in hand. And that's the only way we can prepare and achieve, the renovation wave and all the changes that all the European policies and strategies have been promoting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariangela. Now we pass on to Celine. From you, Celine, it will be very interesting to learn a little bit about the perspective coming from the energy efficiency sector, what it's needed to ensure that the workforce is prepared on time, both at the legislative level, but also like in general as an enablers and so on and so forth. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. So I'm today with you on behalf of the Renovate Europe campaign, of which my company, Saint-Gobain, French building material provider, but also active in distribution, is a founding member. Last autumn at the Renovate Europe Day, Renovate Europe produced a useful report trying to flag some of the key challenges. I'd like to mention a few in introduction on speeding up the delivery for renovation. You can check, it's on the website. And it was framing some of what has been already discussed here, three main challenges in terms of attracting young people, but also from other sectors, women, new talent. And it was assessed that with the Green Deal, about 500,000 jobs in construction would be added in the next decade. So it's not nothing. And there we need to work on the attractiveness of the apprenticeship schemes, work on the appeal, also work on it echoes very strongly what you were saying, Mariangela, how proud those young people can be to actually help with the green transition. These are our neighbors. This is something that is not necessarily passed on. So attractiveness, the upskilling part as well. It was assessed that 3 to 4 million people will need upskilling to face renewable, but also renovation. And there we're talking about ability to maybe install multiple measures, about ability to appreciate the holistic renovation, to coordinate the different measures, or to maybe inform. They also have a role in informing people regarding this aspect. That is maybe not just one step, but also new jobs like renovation project managers. And these are public and private jobs. A lot of creativity and new small enterprise are needed there. And the third main challenge was to really design forward-looking training programs. This is about construction, but it is also about the whole value chain. And yesterday that dimension was flagged in a parallel session with Rada and Kanef, that it goes probably beyond the EPBD. So these are the main challenges that were flagged. Now, bringing that to the actual discussion regarding the policy framework and what we are talking about with EPBD and some of the most maybe ambitious measures called MEPS, Minimum Energy Performance Standard, I was trying to see how MEPS links to skills. And I'd like to share 4 thoughts on how important it is to have MEPS, not only for how many more renovation we will have, but also for how it can frame the job to be done in terms of skilling, providing new training and skilling. So I take that MEPS is some sort of a meta-organizer. We're not in the metaverse sense, it's really real, but it's meta-organizers in terms of helping to bring people together. Our sector is super fragmented, different types of stakeholders. It takes time to link things. And for renovation to happen, you need the money, you need the people, and you need the support scheme. The MEPS gives a calendar for action, will give a calendar for action at national level. And that is super powerful to project yourself in terms of training. So bringing people together and mapping also where those renovations will be needed. You could imagine that in a given region, people would have access to, public administration would know exactly where to renovate, but also equally consumer would have access to how many people are available to renovate within the next 10, 18 months. Data could help there. So that visibility and that power of maps is very important. And then it links to a demand driver, because maps are going to drive demand. It calls for, and it helps to assess volumes, basically. And when you know volumes are going to be there, you can better industrialize processes. We're still lagging behind in terms of off-site renovation. We need to invest more. Some countries are doing it, but this is still at the infancy compared to what it could become. And so maps can be there to help there. Third, yes, maybe to also say that maps are not alone there in terms of policy making. It needs to be linked to some other tools which are in the EPBD, building renovation, those renovation passports, and ideas that are floating also at national level of basically how to interlink renovation of the building envelope and the switch to a clean heating device. Some are talking about low temperature ready buildings. I mean, these are all areas where new skills are also needed. And that beyond the maps and what they will request in terms of jump of EPC classes or however it will be defined, people can project themselves into the more mid to long term. And fourth, and I'm going to end there, it's also anticipating also on the implementation. I mean, what I heard yesterday from some of the completely passionate people running skillings programs in Central Europe was that trust is needed for people to train. So they need to take time to train. I mean, they are SMEs, micro enterprise. This is difficult to spare time for that. But when you train, then you need to have the demand for what your training is enabling you to do. So basically that happened with NZEB. If NZEB is not implemented on time, then people have the impression to have undertaken training but that the demand is not there. So anticipating on implementation will be super important. And I'm calling this maintain the momentum over time and the visibility that this calendar then is being made very concrete also in terms of skills and training, the MEPS calendar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Celine. Now we move on to Pedro, next in line as our speakers. So, Pedro, we would like to hear from you. So there's a little bit the same question, but like translated onto the renewable energy sector. And it would be very interesting to hear about why is it so important to invest in solar energy? Because as we know, the PBD has introduced as part of the Repower EU Article 9A, so the solar energy in buildings. So it would be nice to hear from you on that perspective. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Eva. So first, wish everyone a good start of the summer and an enjoyable solar solstice. So in this longer day of the year, we're also celebrating the Solar Day. So Solar Power Europe and Solar It Europe are celebrating this important day to remind of the importance and the opportunities that come with solar energy. There are several challenges when it comes to jobs, and that is one. It's not the only one, but it's one of the bottlenecks. So there are huge opportunities, but need to be explored. And to explain it better, I would like to talk about Greek mythology. So we are meeting our members next week in Greece, actually in the Acropolis Museum. So I got inspired by Greek mythology. We all know the history of Icarus, but can I ask who knows who was Daedalus? Raise of hands. Who knows Daedalus? Very good. 2 hands. Very good.
Wow.
That's the point. We all know or most of us know this myth. So Icarus had these wings, was flying too close to the sun, the wings melted, and he fell. But the real hero of this story is not Icarus. It's Daedalus, that was his father, and was the one that built the wings. They were escaping the labyrinth, the famous labyrinth with the Minotaur, Daedalus was already a very famous craftsman in his kingdom, and he made the wings, and he saved himself and his son. But then Icarus didn't respect the indications, don't go too close to the sea or don't go too close to the sun, and his wings melted. This is all the discussion is we have to use all this capacity we have, the ingenuity we have. The challenge is very big, but we need to get out of this labyrinth. We have a critical situation in terms of CO2 emissions. We need to reduce drastically. We need to build wings to get out of this. We all know also that the solar energy is not only good to melt Icarus wings, is good for much more. We have a huge potential in terms of what can be done. And just to give you an example of some numbers, I don't want to give you too many numbers, but with the solar mandate, which we're referring as one of the initiatives within the EPBD, we could reach almost 680 terawatts. I'll show you now. 230 to 680 terawatts of solar photovoltaics. So what I put on the slide is the more conservative. There are analyses also from GRC that go to 680 terawatt hours, or to 560 to over 1,000 terawatt hours if you use solar energy. This is just because the solar thermal, sorry, just because the efficiency is different. So with solar PV, we get electricity, but we have lower efficiency overall. With solar thermal, we get heat, but we have a higher efficiency. So it's a matter also of available areas, how much energy we need in electricity or in heat form. In terms of what it means compared to what we have today, 680 terawatts, which is a higher projection for PV, is 70% of the total renewable electricity production today. Going over 1,000 terawatt hours of solar heat is higher than the total renewable heat generation we have today. So there is a huge potential in using rooftops and making the best out of them. Then, of course, we can discuss how much is the area available, depends on orientation, depends if the rooftops are also ready for this. There are also some analyses that say that over 60% of the rooftops need renovation works before they can also take solar energy. So we're getting more information on this. And that is one of the merits of this discussion. We need to take on the challenge and to keep moving forward to really explore the ingenuity that is out there. So to bring the Daedalus in all of us. In terms of jobs, the challenges are also quite high, not only for the deployment, but both for solar PV and for solar thermal. The deployment takes a big chunk of the jobs demand. Depends on how we look into this, but we'll be talking about 60 to 75% of the jobs that are projected as needed will be on deployment. For currently, there are around 360,000 jobs for PV, 20,000 for solar thermal. What we will need by with the potential deployment that on the solar mandate will go and other initiatives, because this is not only isolate, will go to around 1 million jobs for PV, over 100,000, close to 150,000 jobs for solar thermal. So it's at least tripling the quantity of the number of workers we have in these sectors. And that's where the big challenge comes. So should we step away because the challenge is too big, or should we take the challenge directly and do our best towards that and gather all the different stakeholders that are important for this? Because this signal is one of the important ones. When we talk, are these jobs attractive? These jobs can be attractive, but we can clearly give a signal to workers that need to upskill or to reskill, to younger people, that that's where the future is. And these initiatives and these ambitious initiatives not only gather stakeholders in creating the conditions for them to happen, but they also give a signal not only to investors, also to workers on what can they do in the future and what will be the opportunities. We need to make a strong connection also to the local level. And because the energy transition will not happen if there is not a strong engagement of local stakeholders. And when we talked about local municipalities, we're talking about schools. So we need to create the conditions for them to put their capacities at the service of these huge training, upskilling, reskilling needs that we have. And we also need to understand that we cannot look at the things segmented as we've been doing until now. When we talk about jobs, and one of the difficulty of getting with these numbers is that many of the installers are not doing one technology. So someone is doing solar PV, but they can also do charging ports for electric vehicles, or they can also do solar thermal, doing solar thermal and heat pumps, the same thing. So both on the more electric side or more on the heat side, they usually cover different applications, and the trainings need to adapt to this. The way we have now is that people are being qualified for one specific technology in kind of a segmented way, but these skills intercept. Just to give an example, so someone that is doing solar thermal has the roofing skills. Those roofing skills are applicable for installing solar PV. Someone that is doing the hydraulics of the heating system can do solar thermal, they can do a heat pump, or the electric part the same. So we cannot ask people to completely do all the full training process, and need to find these intercepts and recognize already competencies from their experience, even from other technologies that they already master, and just see what they need to complement. This is essential for us not to lose time. And as Celine was saying, this is one of the issues. One installer that is being trained is not getting income. And this is one of the big difficulties of this process, is we need to make them qualified enough for the task at hand, but we also need to facilitate that they can do this in an efficient way. And an efficient way means also allocating the time needed and not more than that, because of bureaucracies and because of other aspects. We need to get local authorities as involved, as said, but also private sector. So when we come to a huge jump, we need all the training facilities we have, and many of them are private, which are only being used for specific companies to train their installers. But we need to find ways of gathering all this capacity, build up on it, but keep using our our innovative creativity in this favor. And from this, I would just like to mention an example that is quite interesting, which is initially was called, let's say, the Solar Academy Marseille, but it doesn't cover only solar. So yes, they can do training on solar PV, they can do training on solar heat, on solar thermal, but they also do heat pumps and other technologies, because they already recognize all these different modularity on the different technologies and the needs to address different things and to have multi-technology installers, so not anymore segmented. So that's it, and with this, I hope you remember that the real history, the real hero of this history is not Icarus, but is the craftsman behind that was able to find a solution to get them out of the labyrinth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pedro. Very nice analogy indeed. Now, we need very mindful of time, so I want to jump onto Slavica very fast. And Slavica, it would be very important for us to hear how to ensure that these green jobs are, of quality, are safe, and they can, of course, attract new workers into the sector.
Thank you, Eva. Yeah, I'm Slavica, representing here the workers. So we are the European Trade Union for Construction and Woodworkers. And actually, I was a bit surprised when I was looking into the program, and I was expecting much more colleagues from the European Trade Union movement, at least yesterday, to be in, to meet them in the panels, because yesterday the topic and 12 panels was all about skills, and I met one. I met one colleague, and her message actually was, if you want this transition and reskilling, upskilling of workers and having more workers into the sector, you need to enter into a dialogue with them. And this is probably something which was at the end of my presentation as a recommendation, as something which need to be improved. So all this transformation and transition needs to be done between industry and workers' representatives, so that the people doing the work feel they are on board. It's about them, and they also will be those having the knowledge what kind of new skills will be needed in the future, what technologies are needed to fasten up the renovation of buildings. My speech now will start, unfortunately, maybe a bit more presenting the challenges, but all of us are aware of the challenges. But I have to add some aspects of the challenge here as well. One thing is reskilling, upskilling of employees, but it's not the solution. We have a huge labor shortage, and I'm sure you have all read this in media, because it's in many European countries, it's something discussed in the public already, and construction sector is one of the sectors and industries with the highest level of labor shortage, accompanied by skills shortage, especially when it comes to the green jobs we are looking for in the future. There have been some figures mentioned about even more people we will need to do the renovations and reconstructing buildings. Our estimates are between 2 and 3 million of people we would need until 2030. And these figures are from a recent study we have commissioned based simply on the finances which are available on European level for the renovation. So our estimates are even much higher than what the Commission is estimating the people we need. And this adds to the fact that, and the colleague from BPIA mentioned the supply chain. So it's not only about renovating a building or constructing it, it's a whole chain behind this and the people we need for this. Circular economy will be something which will be important for the construction sector. So we will need people for waste management, maintenance, repair, and recycling. So the scope of skills and the scope of people we need is even getting bigger if you look at the supply chain, and if you look at the concept of circular economy, and construction need to be part of this. So what I heard also yesterday in presentations, and I hear it here as well, is, and which is true, we need to improve the attractiveness of the sector. But in which way? I mean, yesterday I heard an interesting approach for improving attractiveness is saying we need to change language. We need to talk about the technician of the future. We need to do better marketing for the professions in the construction sector. Yes, probably this is true, but we would put it into a larger scope. It's about the recognition of the profession and of the person working in the construction sector. And recognition entails also working conditions and entails pay. So people want to be paid, they want to work in a healthy job, they don't want to get sick, they don't want to be hit by a brick, or they don't want to cut off their fingers. I mean, health and safety is an important aspect in the construction sector. Asbestos, another important thing. So renovation, so many buildings still, I don't know the figures, but still asbestos is still in many buildings, and renovation means asbestos will be emitted. So, and it's highly complicated to renovate buildings with asbestos. You have to have super accurate measures in place so that protect the people working in the renovation and being confronted with asbestos. Then we would like to a little kind of alert. We have to be quick with the renovation to reach the targets, which are already, I mean, there are discussions saying we will not reach the targets. But doing it quickly for workers, this means putting them into danger. Health and safety. So will they be enoughly trained so that they can safely do the job? But this needs time, and time was mentioned is an important aspect. And for the consumer, a quick fix later on will then create a problem in the house. I mean, I was once in an event where a person from the UK, because in the UK they have already measures in place for renovations and all these things. But things have been done quick, and then a year later, tenants or owners of houses are confronted with humidity in the building because the renovation was not done well. Yeah, so some of the considerations. I mean, and to do renovation well, you need good trained people working in a safe environment. Then another aspect of lack of attractiveness of the sector is not only the working conditions and pay, it's the whole business model of in the construction sector. So enormous long subcontracting chains. So the constructor is subcontracting many of the tasks which need to be done in construction, which we say, sure, you can do. Not all companies have all the skills and all the knowledge to build or renovate a building, but this now is misused. So too many subcontracting firms are on a site, and there is a business model behind. Subcontracting, unfortunately, what we have realized is linked to avoiding putting in place health and safety measures, paying taxes, paying social security to the people, paying health insurance to the people. So unfortunately, in the last part, especially of the subcontracting chain, people are very badly treated. And this on a construction site where there are workers fairly treated with a good salary, work parallel on the same site with people being very badly treated. And this is not, you don't want to work in this kind of environment. So this adds on the, let's say, difficult notion of attractiveness in the construction sector. So this about the construction, the attractiveness and the working conditions. So I would like I would like, when we talk about attractiveness, I would like to say recognition. I would like rather that we talk about a fair recognition and evaluating the job and the people in the construction sector, with all the improvements we need to make. Okay, I skipped this thing because time, so I go to what we think should be improved. So change a business model. So we want a directive on limiting subcontracting in the construction sector. So not for all sectors. We talk about our sector. New technologies. I was reading in the Commission document on the Pact for Skills, the construction sector is the least innovative industry. And little, I don't know, 20% of companies invest in new technologies. New technologies are important to make it attractive, have women on board, have younger people on board in the construction sector. So here the industry must, work on its innovation. yeah, training, of course, was mentioned. Just a figure, in the construction sector, the training amount is, or the level of training is 70%, which is ridiculous. The Pact for Skills is aiming for 25%. I hope we get there. Then qualifications. Yeah, I think here it was mentioned from the solar industry, that people have skills, but we need to combine them with other skills, or we need to get people together with different skills and then do the job. What is important is about the recognition of existing skills, which is a problem, especially when people want to go working abroad. Then you have difficulties to get your skills recognized, which then leads to less payment. So here a lot needs to be done to improve this. So to have, because mobility is one of the solutions, they say, for labor shortage, which is also only partly true because we have labor shortage in all European countries. So we will not solve the problem if we get all the people from one country to another one.
Yeah. Sorry,
And yeah, okay.
Sorry, we need to move on. I'm very, very sorry, because I mean, I will give you all my whole day actually too, because the points raised so far are very, very important. So very, very sorry to cut you off. So since we have very few minutes left, I want to do something creative. I will ask to play the word cloud, because I think this is a very important moment to ask you, in view of all the things that we have been hearing so far from the speakers, what, in your view, is something that we need to bring forward in the energy performance of buildings directive, or in general, also like in our energy and climate policy, to deliver a just and ambitious transition in the building sector that creates quality and inclusive jobs for all? And then I will ask our stakeholder speaker to actually share orally their element with the audience. Meanwhile, all the participants are contributing to the word cloud. I don't know if who wants to start. Yes, Pedro, go ahead.
I can start. Yesterday at the opening, there was one interesting statement from the speakers. I don't recall the name now. I'm sorry. Saying that the electric bulb was not invented by continuously improving the candle. And so we need to move towards new solutions. We need to go and really use this ingenuity we have in our society, in the different stakeholders, and believe that with a common goal, we can really get up to the challenge. And we had examples also with the pandemic and so on. So I hope the member states in particular, because we're talking about the transposition of the PBD also, drop the candles. That would be my challenge.
Thanks a lot, Pedro. Yes, Lavica?
Yes, I was mentioning in the beginning of my introduction, get engaged with the unions and with the workers' representatives on company level and on national level, regional level. So get both most important key players in this on board.
Thanks so much. Mariangela, Celine, would you like to?
I think I'm just reiterating a point that I made before. I think the EPBD can again strengthen the message that this change is going to happen. And as Pedro said, we need to find new ways to make it happen, but it is going to happen. And there are plenty of opportunities also. We discuss about the challenges, but there are plenty of opportunities to make it happen. And just we need to be innovative in how we make what we know, we bring it together to make something new and not just improving it. It's just we need a big jump, and it's no more time for incremental improvements.
Thanks a lot, Mariangela. Celine?
Yeah, I would use two words. One is echoing also what I said in terms of mapping, because when you map things, you make them concrete, and then it's already a big step towards happening. And the other one is responsibility, and we're all there responsible for making it happen. Obviously, as industrial stakeholder, we have expectation towards the policymaker, but we also have, and we are already doing, but we can do much more also in terms of helping with sorting out the training and skills challenge. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Celine, and thank you so much for your very important interventions. I see from the workload that holistic approach is very big, also with political will, skill recognition, and I think we also need to add a lot on visibility, as been hearing from the stakeholder panel. Planning is key, mapping, also sharing of responsibility in terms of implementation. Also not shying away from the challenges, because Pedro was saying, I mean, we need to really make, and also as you, Mariangela, was saying, we need to make the jump because the time is now and we need to do it together in the most synergic way. And of course, and the most important of all, actually having an open dialogue, with the trade unions and actually the workers that will indeed do the jobs and be actually one of the active actors within the renovation, but also construction value chain. So I thank you all. I would have a round of applause for our fantastic speakers and also the audience for being also very patient. And I wish you a nice continuation of the conference. Thanks a lot.